we are coming together to witness a profound truth. We are about to delve into the very heart of human struggle, to walk hand in hand with despair, and then, oh then, to gaze upon the magnificent, undeniable light of hope, breaking through the darkest of nights. This is a story for every weary soul, for every heart that has felt the crushing weight of burdens too heavy to bear, for every mind that has been plagued by the insidious whisper, the dark, tempting thought of giving up. This is a journey into the raw vulnerability of our human condition, and then, into the boundless, transformative power of divine grace. The title of our message, etched not just on your screens but on the very tablets of our hearts, is simply this: she was ready to give up, then this happened. And as we embark upon this sacred exploration, I want you to remember, beloved, that the woman whose journey we trace tonight, a woman named Sarah, is not just one individual. In many profound ways, her struggle, her pain, her ultimate breakthrough, is our struggle, our pain, our very own opportunity for breakthrough. Can you imagine her? Can you feel the invisible chains of exhaustion that wrapped around her spirit? Can you sense the profound, bone-deep weariness that had settled upon her like a suffocating shroud? Sarah was there. She had reached that precipice, that desolate, lonely, echoing place where the very concept of tomorrow felt like a cruel mockery, where the light of hope, once a vibrant flame, had dimmed to a barely perceptible flicker, threatening, at any moment, to extinguish itself entirely. She had fought battles, oh, how she had fought! She had wrestled with demons, both seen and unseen, external pressures and internal tormentors. She had climbed mountains, only to find another, steeper peak looming ahead, its summit shrouded in impenetrable fog. She had built dreams, brick by painstaking brick, only to see her creations crumble to dust beneath the relentless winds of life's disappointments. She had loved deeply, profoundly, yet had experienced the piercing agony of betrayal, the gut-wrenching pain of loss, the chilling emptiness of abandonment. And now, her strength was gone. Her spirit, once a vibrant tapestry of passion and purpose, was reduced to frayed threads, barely clinging to the last vestiges of warmth. She was tired, so utterly, profoundly tired, not just in body, but in the deepest recesses of her soul. And the insidious whisper that had been a faint suggestion for so long, a background hum in the cacophony of her despair, had now swelled to a deafening roar. Give up. Just give up, Sarah. There's nothing left for you here. There's no point in fighting anymore. The battle is lost. Just surrender to the darkness. Let it consume you. Find your peace in the void. My friends, perhaps you know that whisper. Perhaps you have felt its cold breath upon your own neck, its chilling tendrils creeping into your own mind. It comes in many forms, doesn't it? For some, it's the relentless pressure of financial ruin, the stack of unpaid bills growing higher and higher, the wolf of poverty howling at the door, the specter of homelessness haunting their every waking moment, stealing their sleep, poisoning their days. For others, it's the agonizing pain of a broken relationship, a trust shattered, a love lost, a betrayal so deep it splinters the very faith in human connection, leaving them feeling abandoned, unlovable, utterly alone in a world that suddenly feels cold and indifferent. For still others, it's the relentless march of chronic illness, a body betraying them day after agonizing day, pain a constant, unwelcome companion, stealing their energy, their joy, their purpose, their very identity, until life becomes a cruel exercise in endurance, with no end in sight. And for so many, oh so many, it's the silent, invisible battle of the mind, the crushing, suffocating weight of depression that drains the world of its color, the paralyzing grip of anxiety that twists every thought into a knot of fear, the relentless cycle of negative self-talk that convinces them they are unworthy, unlovable, a burden, a failure, a mistake, a drain on everyone around them. The specific circumstances may differ, the reasons for despair may vary as widely as the stars in the night sky, but the destination, that dark, desolate valley of hopelessness, is tragically, profoundly familiar to far too many human souls. For Sarah, this woman whose journey we trace tonight, her path to the precipice was not a sudden plunge, but a winding, arduous, agonizing descent. It wasn't one single catastrophic event that pushed her over the edge, no. It was 1,000 tiny cuts, a million small disappointments, a slow, insidious erosion of her spirit, like water steadily wearing away stone. She had always been a giver, a nurturer, someone who instinctively put others first, often at the expense of her own well-being. She poured herself out, relentlessly, tirelessly, believing that if she gave enough, if she loved enough, if she sacrificed enough, if she managed to fix everyone and everything around her, she would eventually find the peace, the joy, the fulfillment she so desperately craved for herself. But the well, my friends, the well began to run dry. She emptied herself, and no one, it seemed, was pouring back into her. She found herself in a constant state of depletion, like a vessel with 1,000 tiny, unseen holes, constantly losing what little she had, trying desperately to fill herself with the very air around her, with the fleeting approval of others, with the hollow echoes of past achievements. She had lost her way. The compass of her soul, once pointing true north, once guided by a clear sense of purpose and direction, now spun wildly, disoriented by the relentless storms she had weathered. She tried to find her footing, to regain her balance, to summon the strength she once possessed. She devoured self-help books, sought advice from well-meaning friends, tried to think positive, to manifest a better reality. She even tried to pray, though her prayers often felt like hollow echoes in an empty, unresponsive room, unheard, unanswered, bouncing back to her with a chilling silence. But each attempt, each valiant, desperate effort, seemed to fall short. It was like running through quicksand, exerting immense energy only to sink deeper, the suffocating mud of despair rising higher and higher, threatening to engulf her entirely. The world, once vibrant and full of possibility, began to dim, its colors fading to a dull, monochromatic gray. Laughter sounded hollow, joy felt like a distant, almost forgotten memory, and even the simple act of breathing, the fundamental rhythm of life, became a laborious, painful exercise, a constant reminder of the burden of her existence. Her smile, once genuine and radiant, became a carefully constructed mask she wore for the world, a fragile disguise to hide the agonizing pain within. She perfected the art of appearing fine, of nodding politely, of offering superficial pleasantries, even as her soul was screaming in silent anguish, a cry that no one seemed to hear, not even herself. The insidious nature of profound despair, my friends, is that it isolates you. It builds invisible walls, thick and impenetrable, around your heart, around your very being, convincing you that no one could possibly understand the depth of your pain, that no one truly cares, that you are a burden, and that your suffering is uniquely yours and far too heavy for anyone else to bear. Sarah pushed away those who tried to reach her, not out of malice, not out of resentment, but out of a deep-seated shame, a conviction that her brokenness was too ugly to expose, too contagious to risk contaminating others. "I'm okay," she'd say, her voice thin, her eyes averted, her body language stiff, even as her spirit was screaming, "I am drowning. Can anyone hear me? Can anyone see me?" And the more isolated she became, the more convinced she was that the whisper of give up was not only a truth, but the only truth left. It promised an end to the pain, a release from the relentless struggle, a cessation of the agony. It painted a false, seductive picture of peace, a siren song promising rest, even if that rest meant oblivion, disappearance, non-existence. The very thought of continuing, of enduring one more day, one more hour, felt like an insurmountable mountain, a punishment she could no longer bear. And so, she found herself at that precise moment, that moment of ultimate surrender. She had exhausted every last drop of her strength. Every flicker of hope, every last ember of resilience, had, it seemed, finally died. She looked around at her life, at her circumstances, at the sum total of her efforts, her sacrifices, her struggles, and saw nothing but wreckage. The dreams she had cherished were shattered beyond repair. The plans she had meticulously made were dust, scattered by the winds of disappointment. The future, once a canvas of possibility, was now a bleak, impenetrable fog, devoid of color or form. She had tried, oh how she had tried. She had poured her heart and soul into every effort, every solution she could conceive. But the trying, the relentless striving, had become more agonizing, more soul-crushing, than the very thought of giving up. Her mind, once a vibrant garden of creative thoughts and possibilities, was now a desolate wasteland, choked by the weeds of despair, self-condemnation, and an overwhelming sense of failure. The weight was too much. the burden too heavy, the path too long. And in that moment, in that sacred, agonizing moment of utter desolation, a moment that felt suspended between time and eternity, she made her decision. She was ready to give up, to relinquish her hold, to let go of the struggle, to simply cease, to disappear, to fade away. The decision was made, not with a flourish of drama, not with a desperate cry for attention, but with a quiet, bone-deep weariness, a profound resignation that this was, indeed, the only way out, the only possible escape from the relentless torment. She had no more tears to cry, no more energy to fight, no more will to resist. The world, her world, was closing in, its walls collapsing around her, and she was prepared to close her eyes and simply fade away into the vast, silent oblivion. Her last conscious thought was simply, enough. She made her preparations, quiet and methodical, moving through her home like a ghost, as if performing a somber, sacred ritual, a final act of resignation. Each action was devoid of emotion, a robot-like execution of a final, irrevocable decision. The silence around her was profound, thick and heavy, broken only by the rhythmic thud of her own broken heart, a drumbeat of despair. Her spirit felt detached, observing from a distance, as if this final, desperate act belonged to someone else, to a stranger, not to the vibrant, hopeful woman she once was. There was a strange, chilling sense of calm in this surrender, a terrifying tranquility that comes when all battle has ceased, when all resistance has crumbled, when the inner war has finally ended in defeat. It wasn't peace, no, not true peace, but rather the quiet hum of utter exhaustion, the final, terrifying silence before the unknown. She closed her eyes, ready to embrace the void, ready to step into the vast, cold expanse where the pain could no longer reach her, where the demands of life could no longer touch her. The air grew heavy, thick with the weight of her decision. The world seemed to hold its breath. And in that precise, critical, pivotal instant, when the last thread of hope, the very last fiber of her will, was about to snap, then this happened. Oh, my beloved brothers and sisters, listen closely now, for this is the very heart of our message. This is the moment where the divine hand, unseen yet undeniably present, reached down. This is the moment where the impossible became possible, where the insurmountable was suddenly, miraculously, surmounted. This is the moment where the universe, or perhaps, a force infinitely greater than the universe, intervened. It wasn't a clap of thunder from the heavens. It wasn't a blinding flash of light that defied all known physics. It wasn't a booming voice from above, commanding her to choose life, though for Sarah, in the profound depths of her soul, it felt like nothing less than a direct, personal miracle, a divine whisper intended only for her. No, for her, at that very moment, when her spirit was poised to depart, when her grip on life had finally, irrevocably loosened, when the darkness was complete and absolute, a sound pierced the profound, suffocating silence that had enveloped her. It was faint, almost imperceptible at first. A tiny, almost insignificant sound. A small, persistent, insistent chirp. Then another, and yet another. A bird. A small, common sparrow, perhaps, perched just outside her window, on a branch of a barren tree, obscured by the grimy pane of glass. Chirping. Not a soaring, melodious song, not a grand declaration of joy, but a simple, persistent, everyday chirp. The sound of life, continuing. And then, as if in perfect, synchronous response, a ray of sunlight, a single, slender, golden shaft, broke through the heavy, oppressive clouds that had obscured the sky for days, for weeks, for what felt like an eternity. It pierced the gloom outside, found its way through the narrow gap in her curtains, the very curtains she had drawn tightly to block out the world, and landed, directly, unmistakably, on the small, withered houseplant sitting on her windowsill, a plant she had long neglected, forgotten, left for dead, its leaves brown and brittle. And on that plant, on a tiny, almost invisible stem, a stem she had assumed was lifeless, there was a new bud. A vibrant, fresh, green, utterly tenacious bud, pushing its way through the dry, brittle earth, reaching, defiantly, for the light, for life. A bird, a ray of sunlight, a tiny, new bud. That was this. It wasn't a grand revelation that shook the foundations of the earth. It wasn't a cosmic answer to her desperate, unspoken prayers. It was mundane. It was simple. It was utterly, profoundly ordinary. But in that moment of absolute, crushing despair, in the suffocating silence of her final decision, its very ordinariness was its power, its profound impact. For in that small, seemingly insignificant convergence of persistent life, the unwavering, persistent chirp of the bird, the unexpected warmth and light of the sun, the undeniable, tenacious will of the tiny bud to grow, to live, something within Sarah stirred. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor, a flicker, not of hope, not yet, not of joy, but a flicker of curiosity, a question, a raw, unbidden question that pierced through the haze of numbness. How, she thought, her mind, so long a desolate wasteland, suddenly, faintly, engaging, reconnecting to the world outside herself. How can that tiny bud still grow when I can't find the will to move? How can that bird still sing when my world is utterly silent? How can that sun still shine when I am drowning in darkness? It was a crack, a hairline fracture, thin as a spider's silk, in the impenetrable, solid concrete wall of her despair. And through that crack, a tiny sliver of light, a microscopic breath of fresh, life-giving air, seeped in. It didn't instantly dispel the darkness. The crushing weight was still there. The bone-deep weariness still clung to her like a shroud, a heavy cloak of misery. The thought of giving up had not vanished entirely, but the absolute finality of her decision, the chilling, resolute conviction to surrender, was, for that one fragile moment, interrupted. She didn't leap to her feet, suddenly filled with newfound vigor and purpose. She didn't instantly find all the answers to her problems. No. What happened was far more profound, far more miraculous in its subtlety. She paused. Just for a moment, she paused. And in that pause, the universe, the divine, the very fabric of existence, held its breath with her, waiting to see what she would choose. She didn't know it then, but this was grace, unmerited favor, unexpected kindness, unearned intervention. It wasn't a reward for her efforts, for she had none left to give. It was a gift given in her utter depletion, in her complete emptiness. It wasn't a direct answer to her conscious prayers, for she had stopped praying long ago. It was an act of profound mercy for her silent, unspoken suffering. It was the universe whispering, through the humble voice of a bird and the defiant tenacity of a tiny plant, not yet. Not today, Sarah. There is still life here. There is still a bud of hope, however small. There is still a ray of light, however faint. The immediate aftermath was not a dramatic turnaround, not a sudden, complete reversal of fortune. It was a struggle, still. A slow, agonizing, uphill climb, 1 millimeter at a time. That initial pause, that moment of interruption, that fragile crack in the wall, gave her just enough space, just enough breath, to consider another option. Not giving up. Just one more breath, one more minute, one more day. She looked at the bud on the plant, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, a tiny, almost imperceptible emotion stirred within her, a flicker of care. A faint, fragile desire to see if that bud would open, to see if the sun would return tomorrow, to hear the bird sing again, just one more time. And so, she took the smallest possible step. She didn't conquer the world. She didn't solve all her problems. She didn't even find a grand reason to live. She simply chose not to give up, just for that moment. And then, when the next moment came, she chose it again, and again. She reached for the watering can, a forgotten object, and watered the plant. It was a simple act, mundane, yet it was imbued with immense, cosmic significance. It was an act of nurturing, not just for the plant, but for that nascent, fragile flicker of hope within herself. She reached out a trembling hand and slowly, deliberately, opened the curtains fully, letting the light flood in, not just into the dusty, stale room, but into the hidden, shadowed corners of her soul. She sat by the window and listened to the bird, truly listened, hearing not just random chirps, but a song of persistent, undeniable life, a symphony of resilience. She began to understand, slowly, painstakingly, with each agonizing breath, that hope was not a grand, roaring fire that consumed everything in its path, but often a tiny, persistent spark that had to be carefully nurtured. She realized that true strength wasn't about feeling strong, but about continuing to move forward, to take one more step, even when she felt utterly weak, when every fiber of her being screamed for rest. She began to grasp that healing wasn't a sudden, magical event, but a gradual, deliberate process, like the slow, beautiful unfolding of that tiny bud into a magnificent bloom. She reached out, tentatively at first, to one person she had pushed away, a trusted friend, and confessed, with a voice trembling with fear and shame, the depths of her despair, the agonizing closeness of the brink. And in that raw, terrifying vulnerability, she found not judgment, not condemnation, but a loving, gentle hand reaching back, pulling her softly, steadily from the abyss. She discovered that her pain, when shared, was no longer a solo burden, but a pathway to connection, a bridge to understanding. The journey from the brink of giving up is not a smooth, paved road. It is fraught with challenges, with unseen obstacles, with steep inclines and dangerous descents. There are days when the old whispers return, when the shadows lengthen, when the weight of the past threatens to drag you back down into the familiar darkness. Sarah had those days. Oh, yes, she had those days. Days when the tears flowed freely, days when the exhaustion returned, days when the temptation to revert to old, destructive patterns was almost overwhelming. But each time, she remembered the bird, the sun, the bud. Each time, she held onto that fragile, tenacious image of life stubbornly persisting, of grace intervening. And each time, she found, deep within her, a new wellspring of strength, not of her own making, but a strength poured into her by that same grace that had intervened at her darkest hour, a strength that sustained her when her own was depleted. She began to rebuild, not a perfect life, no, for perfection is an illusion that leads only to frustration, but a real one, a life built not on illusions or pretenses, not on external validation, but on the solid, unshakable ground of truth, authenticity, and hard-won wisdom. She learned to embrace her imperfect irons, to forgive herself for her past mistakes, to understand that her brokenness was not a flaw, not a disqualifier, but a sacred part of her unique, unfolding story, a testament to her resilience. She sought help, professional help, spiritual guidance, allowing others to pour into her, to equip her with tools she hadn't known existed, to heal wounds she hadn't known how to address. She learned to set boundaries, to say no when necessary, to protect the delicate shoots of her own well-being, to guard her peace. She rediscovered forgotten passions, unearthed buried talents, and began to weave a new tapestry for her life, thread by painstaking thread, each one imbued with a deeper meaning, a richer color. And as she healed, as she grew, as her spirit began to blossom once more, a profound, undeniable transformation occurred. She realized that her agonizing experience at the brink, that terrifying encounter with despair, had not been in vain. It had stripped away all the non-essentials, all the false identities, all the superficial layers she had used to protect herself, leaving only the raw, authentic core of who she truly was. And in that raw authenticity, she found a power, a purpose, a profound sense of compassion and empathy that she had never known before. Her scars, once sources of shame and pain, became badges of honor, silent, eloquent testimonies to a battle fought and won, not by her own might alone, but by the undeniable, life-giving power of this, that unexpected, unrooted, utterly divine intervention that reminded her she was seen, she was loved, and she was worth fighting for. Now, my friends, Sarah stands not at the brink of giving up, not in the shadows of despair, but at the dawn of a new, vibrant, purpose-filled life. Her eyes, once hollow and weary, now sparkle with a profound understanding of life's preciousness, its fragility, and its immense potential. Her shoulders, once hunched under the weight of the world, are now straight, radiating an inner peace and a quiet strength. Her voice, once silenced by shame and self-doubt, now carries a message of hope, not just for herself, but for every soul who feels on the verge of surrender. She understands, with a depth that only profound experience can bring, that the darkest moments are often the fertile ground for the most profound growth, the most beautiful blossoming. She knows, with an unwavering certainty that transcends mere belief, that when you think you have nothing left, when you are truly, irrevocably ready to give up, that is precisely when this can happen. That is when grace appears, sometimes in the grandest, most overt forms, but often, more beautifully, in the smallest, most unexpected, most humble manifestations of life: a bird's song, a ray of sun, a tenacious bud pushing through the earth. Her story, Sarah's story, is no longer one of despair, but one of triumphant resilience. It is a living, breathing testament to the truth that no matter how dark the night, no matter how heavy the burden, no matter how loud the insidious whisper to give up, there is always, always, this waiting to happen. There is always a moment of grace, a crack in the darkness, a divine intervention that can turn the tide, that can shift the course of your very existence. And her life now, oh, her life now is a powerful testament to the power of choice, the choice to pause, the choice to take one more breath, the choice to look for the tiny bud of hope, the choice to believe in the possibility of this. So, I ask you tonight, my beloved brothers and sisters, as you reflect on Sarah's incredible journey, and perhaps, on the quiet, hidden struggles of your own heart, what is your this waiting to happen? What tiny flicker of life, what unexpected sign, what seemingly insignificant interruption, is God, the universe, grace itself, trying to show you, trying to whisper into your soul? Are you listening for the bird's song amidst the noise of your despair? Are you watching for the ray of light, even when the clouds seem impenetrable? Are you willing to nurture that tiny, tenacious bud within yourself, even when all seems lost, even when you feel utterly defeated? Remember Sarah. Remember her struggle, her pain, her profound readiness to give up. And then, remember this. Remember the power of the smallest, most ordinary miracle. For it is in those moments, in those desperate seconds when all seems lost, when you are at the very end of your rope, that the greatest redemption can begin. It is then that grace steps in, not because you earned it, but because you need it. It is then that hope, the indisruptible hope that defies all logic and all circumstance, is rekindled. And it is then that your own incredible journey from the brink can truly begin, transformed by the power of this, the profound, life-altering, divine intervention that reminds us all, you are never truly alone. Your story is never truly over until you choose for it to be. And there is always, always, a reason to choose life, to choose hope, to choose one more breath, because the story, my friends, the beautiful, grace-filled story, is far from over. Amen. And may you forever carry the light of this in your heart, guiding you through every shadow, into